everyone, and welcome back to this new video series in which my good friend and the world's best-known climate skeptic, Lord Christopher Monckton, and I try to explain the climate science to you and change the cultural and political climate so that we can live in a climate of freedom again. In today's video, we will focus on the question, is the climate consensus really 97%? In our last video, we have already shown that the argument from consensus is based on two logical fallacies, which were first described 2,400 years ago by Socrates in Greece. Today, though, I want to explore what it is that 97% of scientists are said to agree about, and where this consensus statement even comes from, and whether it is in fact accurate. Spoiler alert, it is not.
The first key point to understand about the consensus statement on which 97% of scientists are falsely said to agree is that that statement does not even say that global warming is net harmful either to our species or to our planet. And still less does that consensus statement on which these scientists are said to agree say that the harm caused by global warming will be, in Mr. Obama's words, catastrophic.
Obviously, though, that is how climate activists are trying to frame it as. So what does the consensus statement actually say?
All that the consensus statement says is that recent warming is mostly man-made.
That is a very broad claim, and science is all about precision and specific data. So what do they mean by recent?
When they talk about recent warming, they're really talking about global warming in the 70 years since 1950. And they're saying that most of that was caused by us. Before 1950, our influence on the climate was too small to be significant.
But in May 2013, as I said in my last video, although Barack Obama is of course not a climate scientist, at least he was the President of the United States, whom we should be able to trust, he tweeted that 97% of scientists agree that climate change is real, man-made and dangerous. So we should ask ourselves, what justified his decision to use such a strong term, dangerous?
Mr. Obama was referring to a paper published by John Cook, a cartoonist, in a science propaganda journal. Now, some viewers have asked us to give the figures and the data from this paper, and so that's what I'm going to do. Cook said that he and his friends had read 11,944 peer-reviewed papers on climate and related topics published in the 21 years from 1991 to 2011. And what Cook said is that 97.1% of those papers, which by implication is about 11,600 papers, had written that recent warming was mostly man-made. In fact, as we shall see, only 0.3% of the papers cited by Cook and his colleagues actually stated that recent warming was mostly man-made. But Cook reported that 0.3% as 97.1%. And in a subsequent paper, Bedford and Cook, he actually said that 97.1% of the papers he had reviewed had said that recent global warming was mostly man-made.
Excuse my suspicion, Christopher, but why would this number, 97.1%, become such an essential figure that climate activists and allegedly climate scientists from all over the world keep coming back to when they want to demonstrate their dominance in the scientific realm on climate change? So how did Cook get from 0.3% to 97.1%?
Well, Naomi, first, Cook excluded 2/3 of the papers. Their abstracts, the summaries at the beginning of each paper, these are known as abstracts, had actually said nothing about consensus at all. And then Cook and his friends excluded nearly all of the rest of the papers because they said no more than that we cause some warming, not most warming, but some warming. But Cook and his friends, in their own list of the 11,944 papers, only marked 64 of those papers as actually saying that we caused most of the warming since 1950. And when Legates et al. In 2015 in the Journal of Education and Science reviewed what Cook had done, and I was a co-author of that paper, we found that only 41 of those 64 papers actually said we had caused most of the warming.
That is astonishing, Christopher, and honestly, I do find it hard to believe that this paper was so dishonest as to claim that 97% of those 11,944 papers had stated that most of global warming or recent global warming was man-made, when in fact only 0.3% had said that. I mean, I do want to trust you, Christopher, but please explain to me, why would I put my trust in you instead of, at least allegedly, 97% of climate scientists from all over the world? How did you check Cook's results?
I obtained a copy of Cook's list of all 11,944 papers, and on the screen you will see a short extract from that list. And as you'll see, it's rather small print, but you should be able to see it, there is one line of text that describes each of the 11,944 papers. And each line ends with a comma, followed by a single digit. Now, Cook's paper explains this. He says that the digit 1 at the end of the line that describes an individual paper indicates that he and his friends had decided that that paper had said explicitly in its summary, its abstract, that recent warming was mostly man-made. So all we have to do to find out what he and his friends themselves thought was to count the number of papers with comma 1 at the end of a line. And it turns out that only 64 of the 11,944 papers were marked by Cook and his friends as stating that recent warming was mostly man-made. And of those 64, when we read the abstracts of those 64 papers, only 41 actually said that recent warming was mostly man-made.
Let me see if I've understood this correctly. So Cook's team went through 11,944 papers and found that only 64 of them said that global warming was mostly man-made, when in fact only 41 said that, even out of those only 64 papers. And in any event, the supposed climate consensus statement that Cook was testing the papers against says no more than that global warming is mostly man-made and not in fact dangerous. So Obama's statement back then was very deceiving, to say the least.
Yes, Naomi, you've got it. That's it. The true consensus is not 97%. In reality, as Cook's paper itself demonstrates, or at least not the paper, but the underlying data that he wouldn't give to me until 3 weeks after he'd got massive international publicity for his paper, showed that he himself and his friends knew perfectly well that only 0.5% of those papers actually said that recent global warming was mostly man-made. And if one were to ask whether those papers had said that global warming caused by us was or might become dangerous, the total would then be even less than the 0.3%.
I think that this climate consensus myth is one of the most influential arguments that climate activists and hypothetical climate scientists use in order to show that climate change is real and man-made and dangerous. And this statement is entirely based on just smokes and mirrors and a study that has been taken out of context and misconstrued in the nastiest ways, as we showed in this video. And you may check all the data and facts that we presented to you in this video. And if you still believe that there is not some kind of agenda against climate realists going on, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm not claiming that there is some kind of conspiracy behind all of this. All I can see is that they are trying to silence us, climate realists. They are trying to hide the facts from you. And we should ask ourselves, why is that? All we want is to have a public debate about the climate science. We do not have an agenda in all of this. And honestly, if you can persuade me, if you can convince me with facts and reason and evidence that the opposite side of the argument is in fact true, then I will admit that I was wrong. But so far, I have not encountered a single climate alarmist that was able to come at me with actual factual evidence for climate change that is catastrophic and man-made. People seem to keep forgetting that the main question is not, is climate change real, but rather, is climate change man-made and catastrophic, and is there a causal relationship between man-made CO2 emissions and global warming or climate change? And even the answer to that question should not be just yes or no, but rather yes, and here are the experiments and the climate models and the exact factors that we used to show that climate change is caused by man-made CO2 emissions. I've said it before and I will say it again. Science is about precision. Climate is an incredibly complex system and you cannot reduce it to just a few variables in a silly computer game. I mean, climate model. So thank you so much once again for watching this video. If you like it, please share it and subscribe to this channel if you're looking forward to more information in this Climate of Freedom series. And even if you disagree with me right now, I would be very interested in your arguments, not just opinions. So please leave them in a comment and I will happily consider them in future videos. If you want some more information, I often leave more information and data in the description, as well as other ways to contact me and social media accounts. If you want to stay up to date with what I'm doing and what's going on with climate realism in my life, stay sane, stay critical of what's put right in front of you, and I don't want you to panic. I want you to think.